My name is Ayaan. I was born in a forgotten village nestled at the foot of the Karakoram Mountains, where winters don't knock. They break the door down. Life there wasn't harsh. It was merciless. We didn't have electricity half the year. No running water. And only one working radio in the village, an old wooden box that picked up faint crackling voices whenever the wind wasn't screaming. I was raised by my dad Ayaan, an ex-medic from the army with trembling hands but an iron heart. He taught me three things: earn with dignity, eat with thanks, and never walk past a man in pain. That's all we had. No internet, no roads, no schools after 5th class. But we had integrity. And that, Dada used to say, was more valuable than gold. I was 22, and we barely survived each month selling hand-carved wooden spoons, bowls, and animal figurines to tourists when they came, which was rare. That morning the snow was ankle-deep. Already, I loaded my woven basket, tied it tight with cloth, and kissed Dada on the forehead. He was coughing again, that dry kind of cough that clings to old men like shadow. "Be back before dark," he rasped. "I will. And I'll sell every last spoon," I smiled, pretending my heart wasn't tight from worry. I walked 3 miles through slippery, curved paths with my boots soaked in freezing slush. The wind howled like a wounded wolf, clawing at my face. Pine trees stood like frozen soldiers, unmoving, their needles white with frost. Only the distant rumble of something unnatural broke the silence. A sound I hadn't heard before. At first I thought it was thunder, but no. It was too metallic. Then a crash, sharp, final. My heart jumped. Tourists rarely drove into these parts in winter. If someone had crashed, they wouldn't last long. Not in this cold. Not alone. I dropped my basket right there and sprinted, slipping, falling, scraping my palms as I climbed over a snowbnk. And then I saw it. A black SUV luxury, flipped. On its side against a tree, windshield shattered like spiderweb glass, engine smoking faintly. I scrambled closer, my boots sinking in snow. Inside the shattered driver's window, a man lay slumped over the steering wheel. His face was bloodied, his coat torn, no movement. "Hello?" I shouted, slapping the glass. "Can you hear me?" No response. I circled around, found the rear door half open. My hands were trembling now, not from the cold, but from something deeper. I reached in, gritted my teeth, and started pulling. He was heavy, maybe 6 feet tall, muscular under that coat. I braced my feet, dug my heels, and dragged him out. Landed in the snow with a muffled groan. Alive. But barely. His lips were turning blue. I tore off my shawl and wrapped it around his chest, pressing against the blood that oozed from a gash near his ribs. I didn't know if I was helping or hurting. I just remembered what Dada taught me. Apply pressure. Don't panic. Keep the heart warm. I needed fire. My hands were ice, but I found a flat patch near the rocks. I piled dry bark leaves, whatever I could gather, then pulled out the lighter I carried, a gift from Dada when I turned 18. It sparked. Once, twice, then flame. The fire grew fast. I dragged him closer. His head lolled to the side. "Stay with me," I whispered, slapping his face gently. "Don't sleep, don't give up." I poured a few drops of water on his lips. He was unconscious, but his chest still moved, shallow, but steady. I sat beside him all night, holding his hand, feeding the fire, whispering stories to the stars just to stay awake. By dawn, the snow had stopped. The trees were silver with frost. My legs were numb, my eyes dry from the wind, and then I felt it. A twitch. He moved. His eyes fluttered open, confused, dazed, but alive. "Where am I?" he croaked. "You crashed." "On the mountain road," I said softly. He stared at me like, "I wasn't real. You saved me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I just nodded. He looked down at the shawl wrapped tightly around him, at the fire crackling between us. Then his eyes met mine again. No one. No one else came? There's no one else out here. I said, only me. He swallowed hard. What's your name? Ayaan, he coughed, then chuckled weakly. Of course it is. What does that mean? I asked. He shook his head faintly, a strange smile on his cracked lips. Nothing, he said. Just, thank you. We stayed by the fire until sunlight melted patches of frost from the tips of pine branches. The man sat upright now, though still wincing. His coat was soaked, the left side torn and stained with dried blood. His cheek had a long gash, bruises. Looming under his eye, he looked like someone who didn't belong in this world. Not here, not in these mountains. He had the kind of face you saw on the covers of business magazines, not in roadside cabins. Yet here he was, wrapped in my tattered shawl, shivering. I helped him stand. He stumbled, leaning heavily on my shoulder. I wasn't big, but years of lifting wood and carrying supplies uphill had taught me how to steady weight. The path down was brutal, narrow, winding, slippery. He barely spoke, only winced occasionally, whispered a sorry or thank you every few steps. I nodded. Each time, not sure how to comfort a man bleeding beside me. He wore a Rolex on one wrist, scuffed but unmistakably expensive. His boots were designer, though caked with snow. His hands were manicured. Yet his face, it was rough, like he had lived through 100 sleepless nights. The silence between us was thick. Only the crunch of snow and our breaths filled the trail. When the first roof of the village came into view, our little world of wooden huts, smoke chimneys and frozen silence, he looked at me sideways. Is this where you live? I nodded. That small cabin up ahead, he gave a faint smile. And you just happened to be there when I crashed. Fate, maybe, he muttered under his breath, or punishment. My grandfather was outside stoking the fire when we arrived. His eyes squinted at the stranger leaning on me. Ayaan? He said, rising. Who is this crash victim? I found him near the upper bend, lost a lot of blood. Without a word, Dada dropped his stick and came forward. In, quickly. We pulled him inside. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms. A stove, a water drum, a prayer mat. The floor creaked under our steps. The man collapsed on the mattress, our only one, and let out a soft groan. Dada examined his side. Broken ribs maybe, head trauma, deep gash. He's lucky. He's lucky I found him, I said. Dada shot me a look, proud but serious. Boil water, he said. We clean this before it infects. I obeyed. That night, I watched Dada do what he hadn't done in years, perform a full dressing. His old medic's hands trembled, but his knowledge hadn't faded. He stitched the man's wound with old thread, cleaned the blood with boiling cloth strips, applied herbal balm we'd made from dried mountain plants, all while the stranger gritted his teeth and bore the pain in silence. Dada asked no questions, and the man gave no answers. He didn't reveal his name. Not yet, but he watched us closely, like he wasn't used to being taken care of. Like kindness confused him. The second day, he sat up against the wall. I handed him a bowl of rice and lentils. He looked at it like it was a gift. No truffles? He teased, lips cracking into a tired grin. We save those for Sundays, I replied. He laughed and winced from the ribs. Thank you, he whispered again. I poured him chai. He took it in both hands and stared into it for a long time. Then, finally, he said, I'm Daniel Rehman. I blinked. The name meant nothing to me. Should I know you? I asked. He gave a lopsided smile. Probably not. But some people do. I own a company called Rehman Tech, based in London. We invest in startups, build AI systems, that sort of thing. I tilted my head. What's AI? He chuckled. Exactly. You're better off not knowing. I stared at him a moment longer. You're not from here. No, he said. But I was born in Pakistan. Left when I was 10. Been gone ever since. Then why come back? His smile faded. Because money doesn't fix loneliness. That answer hung in the air. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridges and cast golden light across the snow, I sat outside sharpening a wood carving. Daniel limped over, wrapped in Dada's old coat. He watched me silently. You make those to sell? He asked. Yes. To tourists? When they come. He looked at the little animal I held. A snow leopard, half finished. You're good, I nodded. Not good enough. We don't make much. Still, he said softly, you have more skill in your hands than some people do with full degrees. I shrugged. I didn't know what degrees even looked like. He sat down beside me, groaning from the ache in his ribs. You didn't ask for anything, he said. Hey, chum. When you found me, you saved me, kept me warm, carried me back, gave me your bed, and still nothing. I didn't do it to be paid. He looked me dead in the eyes. Exactly. Then he pulled out something from the inner lining of his coat, a small black card trimmed in gold, warm from his body heat. He placed it in my hand. It was heavier than it looked. Simple, elegant, just 2 lines on it. Daniel Rehman, for doors you didn't know you could open. On the back, an address in Lahore. If you're ever in the city, he said, bring this to that building. Ask for me. I hesitated. I don't have money for that. You won't need any. Why? He smiled faintly. Because kindness is rare, and I collect rare things. I didn't know what to say. He stood up, then turned and said, also, thank your grandfather for me. He reminds me of someone I once loved and lost. The next morning, a helicopter buzzed above the trees. The entire village came out to watch. Daniel shook Dada's hand. Then mine. Goodbye, Ayaan, he said, slipping a hand into his coat pocket. Then louder to the others, tell the village chief to expect a delivery next week. New coats, blankets, food packages. And just like that, the stranger disappeared into the clouds, taking the mystery with him, leaving only a black card in my pocket, and something new stirring in my chest. 6 months later, the black card still sat in my drawer, untouched, wrapped in cloth, hidden under my prayer beads. Like a secret I didn't know how to use. Life had returned to its quiet rhythm. I sold carvings when the snow cleared. Dadajan still coughed every morning. Only now he coughed more, louder, longer. One morning, I came back from the bazaar to find him on the floor, unable to breathe. His lips were pale. Eyes bloodshot. I panicked. Poured warm water in his mouth, massaged his chest. But I couldn't stop the rattle in his lungs. We had no hospital. No doctor. Only prayers and time. That night, as I sat by his bedside, listening to the sound of his strained breathing, I pulled out the black card, ran my thumb along the gold edge, and made a decision. Packed a small bag. 1 change of clothes. A photo of my parents. The last 500 rupees we had at sunrise. I boarded a battered local bus that swayed with every pothole as it climbed downhill toward Lahore, a city I had only seen in magazines wrapped around street. SIMOSAS. The ride took 18 hours. 18 hours of engine rattle, thick smoke, strangers pressed shoulder to shoulder. When I finally stepped off at the main terminal, my knees trembled. The air smelled like metal, spice, and heat. The noise. Cars honking, vendors shouting. Motorcycles screeching. Felt like a physical slap to my mountain soul. I gripped the black card tightly. It was nearly dusk by the time. I walked the long stretch to the address printed on the back. Rehman Tech HQ. I had never seen a building so tall in my life. A skyscraper made of glass and steel, its surface reflecting clouds like a mirror. It had a private garden, giant golden letters at the front, and guards who looked like movie actors. I approached the front desk, my heart hammering. The receptionist looked at me. Clothes dusty, shoes cracked, bag old. "I'm here to see Daniel Rehman," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. She gave a polite smile. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" I showed her the card. Her smile vanished. She stood, and within seconds, I was being escorted, not thrown out, but invited into a private elevator. As the doors closed, the city shrank below me. My palms were sweaty, my throat dry. What was I doing here? I didn't belong. And yet, the elevator rose without hesitation, as if fate had already pushed the button. 47th floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into a world made of light, glass, and silence. Desks floated like islands in a sea of marble. People in suits moved like they were in a ballet. I felt like a wooden carving in a diamond shop. Then, Ayaan? I turned. Daniel. He looked different. Healthy. Clean-shaven, powerful, dressed in a custom navy suit that probably cost more than our entire house. Yet the warmth in his eyes hadn't changed. "You came," he said, walking toward me like an old friend. I nodded. "My grandfather's sick," I whispered. Without hesitation, Daniel turned. "Follow me." We walked into a glass office larger than my entire cabin. Leather chairs. Framed photos. A window that looked down on the world. Daniel called someone. Spoke quickly. Used words like airlift, priority medical, immediate admission. Then he turned to me. "We're flying your dada to Lahore tomorrow. Private jet. Best hospital. You'll be with him." My eyes burned. "I can't pay for this." "I didn't ask you to. I have nothing to offer you." He leaned forward, gently placed his hand on the table. "You gave me something when no one else would. Your time. Your fire. Your courage. That matters to me more than money ever." "Will?" I wanted to speak, but no words came, only tears. The next morning, a helicopter lifted Dada from the village and flew him to Lahore General Hospital's VIP wing. I rode beside him the entire way. He squeezed my hand once and whispered, "You did this?" I nodded. He smiled through the oxygen mask. "Then maybe I raised you right after all." Over the next few weeks, I stayed in Lahore, sleeping in a guest house Daniel arranged near the hospital. He visited us every other evening, quietly checking on Dada, handing over envelopes to cover medicines, and asking how I was adjusting. One evening, after chai and silence, he turned to me. "Ever worked in an office?" "No." "Ever used a computer?" "Only saw one once. At a police station." He smiled. "How would you like to start working at Rehman Tech?" My jaw dropped. I'm not qualified," he shrugged. "Neither was I when I began. We don't hire backgrounds. We hire character." I wanted to refuse, but then I remembered Dada's cough, our village, that cold night in the snow, and I said yes. On my first day, I wore a borrowed shirt and cheap pants that still smelled of firewood. I was assigned to the mailroom, pushing a cart between departments, delivering envelopes, reports, packages. I didn't complain. I watched. I listened. I learned. By week 3. I had memorized the entire building. By month 2, I could tell who ran what, who lied during meetings, and who had real authority. By month 6, Daniel called me into his office. He tossed a thick file onto the table. "Read this. It's a startup proposal." I opened it. Scanned the numbers, business model, Founder bios. What do you think? He asked. I think they're hiding something. He smiled. Where? I flipped to page 6. Their valuation is fake. They inflated numbers to match market hype. And this founder has a fraud history in Karachi. He leaned back, eyebrows raised. Who told you that? No one? I checked. Their LinkedIn didn't match their press release. He laughed. Ayaan. You're not just a mailroom boy anymore. You're not just a mailroom boy anymore. Wo jumla mir zehen main barbar gunsta raha. Daniel hadn't just seen my work. He had seen me dadas din kebad. Mary Dunya Badal Gay. Next morning, I was shifted from the mailroom to junior analyst under the strategy department. I was handed a desk, a used laptop, and a stack of files thicker than my arms. I didn't know where to begin, but I started. I arrived before everyone else. 6:45 a.m. sharp. I read balance sheets the way I used to read maps in the mountains, slowly, painfully, but never stopping. I asked questions no one wanted to answer. I stayed late, observed meetings, took notes like a silent hawk dot in the cafeteria. Most people ignored me. A few even laughed when I mispronounced terms like equity or capital infusion. But I didn't care, because every Friday afternoon, Daniel called me in for 1 hour, and for that 1 hour, I was a student again. He taught like a soldier, direct, sharp, demanding. Numbers don't lie, he said once. But people do. Learn to hear the silence between words. Another time, business isn't about greed, Ayaan. It's about vision. See something no one else sees and build it before they do. Each session left my head spinning and my heart racing. One day, I walked into his office with a file in my hand. He raised an eyebrow. What's that? A report I created. A system to help Rehman Tech identify rural entrepreneurs in Pakistan. People like me. He flipped through it, paused, read deeper, then slowly looked up. You did all this? I've seen kids in my village with better ideas than half the city graduates. They just don't have access. I want to change that. He leaned back in his chair. You want to build a platform? Yes, a space for people who've never been seen. Daniel tapped his fingers, then said something that sent electricity through my body. Pitch it to me, properly, like a real founder. I stayed up 3 nights, no sleep, just research. Diagrams, mock websites drawn in pencil, a hand-built prototype on paper. I named it Jazba, meaning passion, a platform where artisans, village kids, craftspeople, and local visionaries could post their ideas, crafts, or services. In return, donors or small investors from around the world could fund them directly. With full transparency. On Monday morning, I stood before Daniel in the conference room, hand shaking, but voice steady. I told him how my own carving business could have thrived if someone had believed in me earlier. I told him how dignity doesn't need degrees, just direction. Told him Jazba wouldn't just fund people. It would awaken dreams that had been asleep for generations. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. He just stood, walked over, and shook my hand. You're ready. Daniel personally invested the first $50,000. He assigned 2 tech leads and a designer to help me build the site from scratch. The first version of Jazba launched within 3 months. We featured 10 small creators from different parts of Pakistan. A blind man in Swat who painted landscapes with his fingers. A young girl in Gilgit making bracelets from apricot seeds. A baker from Tar who made bread without flour. A 15-year-old boy from my village crafting wooden foxes that actually moved. Within weeks, donations started pouring in from the UK, US, Malaysia. UAE. People were amazed, not at our polish, but at our purpose. We weren't selling products, we were selling possibilities. One day, I walked into the hospital to see Ayaan sitting up, healthier than I'd seen him in years. He was holding a tablet Daniel had gifted him, watching a video of a young woman in Rahim Yarkhan opening her new tailoring shop, funded entirely through JAZB. Tears slid down his cheeks. "You're making people dream, Beta," he whispered. "You've gone further than I ever imagined." I held his hand and smiled. "I just followed your lessons. You told me never to walk past someone in pain." Months passed. Jazba grew. So did I. I was now giving talks at universities. People from media reached out. Headlines read, "From mountain to millionaire mentor, meet Ayaan. Young man who once carved toys now carves futures." But fame never touched my heart. Only one thing did. Daniel. One night, we sat on the rooftop of his penthouse, the city lights glittering below us. He poured us both tea, not wine. He had quit drinking years ago. "You know," he said, "when I crashed that day, I wasn't just broken physically. I was tired, numb. I stayed quiet." He looked at me. "And you, a boy with nothing, gave me back something I'd lost." "What's that?" I asked. "Faith, in people, in hope, in humanity." He handed me a folder that night. Inside was transfer paperwork. Shares. Assets. A new company branch. "I want you to head a new division," he said. "We're going global. And you, Ayaan, are no longer the student." I swallowed hard. "What am I then?" Daniel smiled. "You're my legacy." 2 years after Jazba launched, it had helped fund over 8,000 rural dreamers across Pakistan, India, Nepal, and parts of Africa. It was no longer just a platform. It was a movement. And at the center of it stood me, Ayaan. Once a boy who carved wooden snow leopards to survive, now delivering keynotes at UN conferences, featured in Forbes, and named among Asia's top 30 under 30, but success, I had learned, was heavy. Not in weight, but in responsibility. Traveled now. To Kenya, where I met women building water filters from clay. To Bangladesh, where orphan boys coded entire websites from donated laptops. To Afghanistan, where a girl built a classroom under a tree. I never traveled in suits, never arrived with a camera crew, because I remembered the boy who found a bleeding man at the edge of a mountain and wrapped him in a shawl without knowing. His name, that's who I still was. No boardroom could change that. Daniel became quieter in those days. He had stepped back from his companies, letting younger CEOs take over. He said his job was done. He had made enough, built enough. Now he just wanted to mentor. One night in Istanbul, we sat in a quiet cafe. The Bosphorus shimmered under the moonlight. He asked, "Do you ever miss home?" I smiled. "Every day." "And your grandfather?" "Still sharp, still telling me to drink turmeric milk." He chuckled, then grew serious. "I want to tell you something." I leaned in. He paused, then said, "I have a heart condition." My breath caught. "I didn't want to burden you," he added, "but it's time you knew." I didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, I asked the question that had burned in my chest for years. "Why did you choose me, Daniel? Out of all people?" He looked at me for a long time, then said, "Because when I was dying, you treated me like a human. Not a billionaire, not a client, not a stranger, just a man. And because of that, I lived." I looked away, fought the tears. He added, "And more than that, because I saw myself in you." Weeks passed, then months. Daniel's condition worsened, but he refused to stop working. We started building a global version of Jazba with translation in 14 languages and a satellite-backed microfunding system for even unreachable villages. One morning, I found a handwritten note slipped under my apartment door. It was from Daniel. "Ayaan, you once saved my life. Now I'm asking you to carry my dream forward. whatever happens to me. Promise me you won't stop. The world doesn't need more billionaires. It needs more bridges. Build them. Always." D stared at the paper for an hour, then called the only person who could steady my soul. Ayaan. "I'm tired. Dada," I confessed that night. "I see the world," I said. "But sometimes I feel I'm losing the part of me that once belonged to the silence of snow, the scent of firewood." He said nothing at first. Then softly, "Beta. A seed doesn't forget its soil just because it has bloomed." I closed my eyes. He continued, "You are not the firewood boy or the billionaire's apprentice. You are both. That's your strength." I wrote Daniel back the next day. One line, "I will build bridges. Always." 2 weeks later, I was in New York, giving a speech at the Global Youth Summit. Midway through, I paused, took a breath, and changed my script. I told them about a snowy mountain, a flipped SUV, a man with blood on his coat, a broken Rolex, a boy with trembling hands who had nothing and yet gave everything. I ended by saying, "That boy was me. That man was Daniel Rehman." And that moment was the beginning of 2 lives being saved. The crowd rose to their feet, but in that applause, my heart felt a quiet ache because I knew what was coming. It happened on a rainy evening in October. I was in Nairobi, visiting a girls' school funded through JASBA, when my phone rang. It was Zara, Daniel's executive assistant. Her voice was quiet, uneven. "He's gone, Ayaan," peacefully, in his sleep. "He left you a letter." I flew back the next morning. The skies were gray, matching the heaviness in my chest. As I stepped into Daniel's penthouse one last time, I could still smell the Earl Grey tea he always drank. The floor-to-ceiling windows were still clean. His books still sat in the exact messy rows he liked. Only he was missing. Zara handed me a small wooden box. Inside, a folded letter, a USB, and an old carved snow leopard. My fingers trembled. Letter read, "My brother and soul, Ayaan, you saved me twice. Once on that mountain, and again when you reminded me what purpose felt like. I've lived a life of power, wealth, and applause. But none of it compares to the look in your eyes when you talk about a child learning to dream. On this USB is everything I ever built, access to accounts, keys to company divisions, my stake in JASBA. But there's something else. I've purchased the entire valley behind your village, the one you used to hike in as a boy. It's yours now. I want you to build there. Not a mansion, not a business park. A school, a sanctuary. A starting line for the ones who were never allowed to begin. Call it whatever you want, but build it with love. You're not just my successor, Ayaan. You're the man I once dreamed I could become. Yours, Daniel Rehman." I sat there in silence, tears falling without resistance. Not because of grief alone, but because I finally understood. Daniel didn't just leave me a company. He left me a mission. 3 months later, I returned home. Not in a rickety bus, but by helicopter. The entire village gathered. Children waved paper planes in the air. Mothers cried. And Dad Ayaan, frail but standing, greeted me at the foot of our old cabin with arms wide open. "You kept your promise," he whispered. I nodded, eyes shining. Now it's time to plant the dream. We began building. Stone by stone, brick by brick. No glass walls, no marble. Just classrooms filled with color, bookshelves from floor to ceiling, and names of every JASBA success story carved into the hallways. We called it the Rehman Ridge. Institute for Rising Voices. Free for all. No entrance exams. Only potential was required. And every classroom had a message above its blackboard. Your value is not in what you own, but in what you lift. In the evenings I would sit with the children under the same pine trees that once guarded me in my loneliest hours. They didn't know I once carved spoons to buy rice. Or that I once slept beside a fire, hoping a stranger would live to them. I was just Ayaan, the guy who believed in them, who taught them to dream beyond the horizon, and that was enough. On the anniversary of Daniel's passing, we held a silent ceremony. We buried a sealed snow globe at the edge of the cliff where his SUV had crashed, a symbol of the moment when everything began. Inside the globe, etched on a gold plate, were these words: "One man fell, another rose." And the world was never the same again. I stood at the summit, wind roaring through my coat, looked out at the clouds curling over the valleys, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had come home, not to the mountain, not to the money, but to the purpose that had once started with a shawl, a stranger, and a single unshakable act of kindness. The end.